Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to do my review of King of the Ring 1998. Starting off the evening, we go to our first match of the night. It is Taka Michinoku and the Headbangers versus Kai and Tai. Thought it was an okay opening matchup for King of the Ring 98. Back and forth matchup between both teams with Taka and the Headbangers keeping the pace of the match. Taka ultimately hits the finish, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Taka Michinoku and the Headbangers. Hats off to Taka Michinoku and the Headbangers for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a King of the Ring tournament semifinal matchup. It is Jeff Jarrett versus Ken Shamrock. Thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Jarrett and Shamrock, with Shamrock keeping the pace of the match. Shamrock hits a Hurricanrana on Jarrett in the middle of the ring, and Shamrock ultimately applies the ankle lock on Jeff Jarrett, and your winner of the match by submission. And moving on in the King of the Ring tournament is Ken Shamrock. Hats off to Ken Shamrock for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another King of the Ring semifinal matchup. It is The Rock versus Dan Severn. The match itself was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between The Rock and Dan Severn, with Dan Severn keeping the pace of the match. D'Lo is here. Referee is distracted. D'Lo ends up hitting a frog splash off the top rope on Dan Severn. The Rock goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and moving on in the King of the Ring tournament is The Rock. A couple of things I'm going to say about this matchup quickly, man. Number one, it was an okay match at best, to be honest with you. Dan Severn, a lot of respect for Dan Severn. But to me, obviously from Dan Severn coming over from the UFC into WWE, it just did not work, in my honest opinion. I feel like even watching this matchup, Dan Severn wanted to do a lot of mat wrestling, which I'm not saying that's wrestling, but the fact of the matter is that he was a pure wrestler. And I feel like he brought in a lot of his MMA background into WWE at the time. And you could tell The Rock was getting frustrated in the matchup. And I feel like Dan Severn kind of still had the, he still was, probably at that time, probably still working with the UFC. So I think the transition for Dan Severn to come into WWE just wasn't there, is pretty much what I'm saying. I feel like he was still kind of stuck in the UFC, especially into this matchup, because it was a lot of holds that he was trying to have, and they weren't really necessarily submissions. And I just feel like he was better, left staying in the UFC than he did in the WWE. I think Dan Severn had a great UFC career. I was a big fan of Dan Severn in the early UFC days. I think he had a fantastic UFC career. But as far as his WWE run, I just feel like it just wasn't there. But hats off to The Rock for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Al Snow and Head versus Too Much. I thought this match was downright awful. It was a back and forth matchup between both teams. Too Much was keeping the pace of the match. Al Snow hits a DDT on Too Much. Snow then hits a snowplow. And then Brian Christopher ends up getting the pin using Al Snow's tag team partner, the Head, hitting Al Snow, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Too Much. Hats off to Too Much for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Owen Hart versus X-Pac. I thought this was a really good matchup. Back and forth matchup between Hart and X-Pac, with X-Pac keeping the pace of the match. X-Pac and Owen Hart both exchange in the middle of the ring. Owen hits a devastating fisherman suplex on X-Pac for a near fall. X-Pac then gets up, hits a Bronco Buster on Owen into the corner. Mark Henry is here. Mark Henry's trying to cause a distraction. Vader then makes his way down to the ring. Vader ends up attacking Mark Henry. Chyna gets into the ring, hits a DDT on Owen, referee being distracted. X-Pac then goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is X-Pac. Hats off to X-Pac for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WWE Tag Team Championships. It is the New Age Outlaws versus the Midnight Express. And don't get me wrong, this is not the Midnight Express with, Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. This is the new Midnight Express. I believe it was Bart Gunn and Hardcore Holly, which I thought was an awful idea. I don't know who came up with that idea. I don't know if it was Jim Cornette. I have no idea. But whoever came up with the idea of the new Midnight Express, it was just downright awful. The match itself was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between the New Age Outlaws and the Midnight Express, with the New Age Outlaws keeping the pace of the match. Billy Gunn hits a Famouser on Bart Gunn. Gunn then hits a Lariat on Bart Gunn, turning him inside out. Gunn then goes for a pile driver, but Cornette hits Gunn with the title. Chyna then attacks Cornette. New Age Outlaws end up hitting the finish. Pin for the 3. And your winners of the match are the New Age Outlaws. Hats off to the New Age Outlaws for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is The Rock versus Ken Shamrock in the King of the Ring finals. I thought the match itself was a relatively good matchup. Back and forth matchup between The Rock and Shamrock, with The Rock keeping the pace of the match. Rock hits a DDT on Shamrock for a near fall. Ken Shamrock then gets up, hits a Northern Light suplex on The Rock for a near fall. But Shamrock ultimately applies his signature ankle lock on The Rock. And your winner of the match and the winner of the King of the Ring tournament is Ken Shamrock. Hats off to Ken Shamrock for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a Hell in a Cell match. It is Undertaker versus Mankind. I thought this match was absolutely awesome. Legendary matchup. Back and forth matchup between Undertaker and Mankind. Mankind climbs the cage. Undertaker and Mankind both exchange on top of the cage. Undertaker ends up throwing Mankind off the top of the cage down to the announce table below. Terry Funk comes out to check on Mankind. Mankind is then put on a stretcher. Mankind then looks like they're taking Mankind to the back. Mankind gets off the stretcher, walks towards the ring, climbs the cage again. Undertaker then hits a choke slam on Mankind, sending him through the cage. Mankind then gets up, hits a pile driver on the Undertaker on a steel chair. Mankind also applies a mandible claw on Taker. Taker then gets out of that, hits a choke slam on Mankind on the tacks. And then Taker ultimately hits his signature tombstone pile driver on Mankind. Pins him for the 3. And your winner of the match is The Undertaker. A couple of things I'm going to say about this matchup, man. Number one, this should have been the main event of King of the Ring. 100%. I mean, this matchup for the King of the Ring, 1998, this Hell in a Cell match, man, was absolutely legendary between The Undertaker and Mankind for a immense amount of reasons. Number one, Undertaker and Mankind, one of the best rivalries that I've ever seen in professional wrestling, in my honest opinion. You know, when Undertaker got inducted into the Hall of Fame, I still believe to this day it should have been Mick Foley inducting Undertaker into the Hall of Fame, not Vince McMahon, in my honest opinion. But I will say this match, I mean, it's a legendary matchup, man. It lives in pro wrestling history. I mean, the stuff that Mankind and Undertaker did that night with Taker throwing him off that cell was just absolutely legendary. And for the fact that, you know, Mankind went through that, got back up out of the stretcher, walked back to the ring, climbed the cage to still try to continue the match with Undertaker, man, is just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. One of the all-time greatest moments of pro wrestling. And it just goes to show you how crazy Mankind was, man. That Mankind took so much damage in his pro wrestling career and just kept on going. Taker, too. I mean, Taker, even to throw him off the cage had it been absolutely crazy for Undertaker to do as well. I mean, hitting that choke slam, sending Mankind through the cell. Absolutely amazing stuff, man. That match will live on forever in professional wrestling, hands down, man. But hats off to The Undertaker for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of King of the Ring 1998. It is Kane versus Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWE Championship in a first blood match. Thought it was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between Kane and Austin, with Austin keeping the pace of the match. During the match, somehow the cell lowers down below to the ring. Undertaker then is here. Undertaker hits Austin with a chair shot. Undertaker then pours gas on the referee. Kane then hits Undertaker with a chair. Austin then hits Kane with a chair shot, but the referee sees Austin busted wide open. And your winner of the match, and at that time, new WWE Champion, is Kane. A couple of things I'm going to say about King of the Ring 1998 before I get out of here, man. Number one, this was a decent event. I'm not going to sit here and say from top to bottom this was an awesome event. There's a couple of matches on here I could have done without. The opening matchup, Taka Michinoku and the Headbangers versus Kai En Tai, I could have done without it, to be honest with you. The King of the Ring matches were okay. They weren't the greatest. Like I stated earlier, the Jeff Jarrett versus Ken Shamrock match was relatively okay. But the Rock versus Dan Severn match, I feel like it was very lackadaisical. And like I stated earlier, Dan Severn should have stayed in MMA or in the UFC, man. I just feel like he had no place in a WWE ring at that time, in my honest opinion. I think Dan Severn had a great MMA career, great UFC champion, but As far as pro wrestling career, man, I just don't think Dan Severn really had it, in my honest opinion. Al Snow and Head versus Too Much. Awful match. Horrendous. I wasn't a big fan of that match at all. Owen Hart versus X-Pac was a decent matchup. But all in all, I mean, to me, the match of the night has to go down to Undertaker versus Mankind in the Hell in a Cell. To be honest with you, that match, like I stated earlier, man, will live in the history of professional wrestling. Fantastic match, fantastic moment in professional wrestling that will live on forever. But based upon that match alone, you know, obviously this was not the best King of the Ring of all time. But with that Mankind versus Undertaker match in the Hell in a Cell, I'm gonna have to give King of the Ring 1998 a solid probably 6.5, close to a 7 at best, just based upon that match alone. The main event was good too. Kane versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in the first blood match for the WWE Championship. But the main reason why King of the Ring 98 is getting a 6.5, if not 7, is basically from the Undertaker versus Mankind Hell in a Cell match, man. But all in all, this is my review of King of the Ring 1998. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.